Hello, everyone. Renée Marino here, and I am so excited to bring you this incredible human being today. His name is Mr. Pat Quinn. Pat Quinn has been entertaining, inspiring, and educating audiences for over 30 years. As a former professional magician, Mr. Quinn learned the art of commanding a stage early in his career. Pat has consulted with professional speakers, pastors, and business leaders to help them improve their presenting skills and more effectively deliver their messages. Pat Quinn is the founder of Storylink.com, the software tool that stores and organizes all of your stories to make creating presentations fast and easy. Everyone, I want to introduce you and welcome Mr. Pat Quinn. Hey!
Hey,
How are you?
how are you, Renee?
Wonderful.
I'm good. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here. I'm super excited about today.
I was so excited all morning, all day. I told you as we spoke a little bit, I was talking about this in clubhouse rooms and anywhere I could. And so many people, which I thought was incredible, so many people were like, Pat Quinn, I love him. He's amazing. I was like, good. Come and tune in.
Tune
I
in.
I just want to say that I really think what you are doing in this world is so incredible and needed by so many. So I'd like to just first start with you telling us a bit about your backstory and how you got to this point in your life and career.
Well, most people know me, Renee, as a professional speaker or a speaking coach, but I actually didn't get my start as a professional speaker. I got my start as a professional magician and worked magic for 10 years professionally. Uh, near the end of that, I thought I probably should get a real job and not do this my whole life. So I became a public school teacher. My mom was a school teacher, and I became a public school teacher, and I taught high school math for 12 years. During that time, I picked up an advanced degree in how adults learn. And so when I work with somebody who's trying to become a better communicator, I really bring two things to the table. The first is a little bit of stagecraft from my years of doing magic. And the second is a real understanding of how the person on the other side of the table, how the person on the other side of the phone or the Zoom call is hearing you, listening to you, remembering what you say. Because I think we spend way too much time paying attention to what we're saying and not nearly enough time paying attention to the person or the people in the audience who are listening. And we can learn so much more by paying attention to our audience on whether or not we're effective communicators. And so now I'm fortunate enough to work with some of the greatest speakers in the world. I coach some of the sharks on Shark Tank like Damon John. I coach Tony Robbins and Dean Graziosi on their KBB project. I coach Grant Cardone and Michael Hyatt and Jamie Kern-Lima and household names that everybody's known. But most of the people that I work with are not professional speakers. Most of the people that I work with wouldn't even consider themselves speakers. Most of the people that I work with every single day are people who have a message, have something they want to communicate, have a business, have a cause, have an organization, and they want to get that message out effectively. And as you and I know and agree, communication is the one skill that can elevate any business, any organization, any person in their skill set. Working on that communication skill and mastering the art of communication adds value in any situation, in any company, and any organization.
I could not agree more, my friend. I could not agree more. Now, when you're helping, especially as you said, individuals who aren't big names as of yet and are everyday people just wanting to speak and wanting to share their message, how do you help them to get out of their own way? Because I know in working with clients myself and just speaking to friends and family, so much of what holds us back from being able to share our story, share our message is ourselves saying like, oh, Renee, no one wants to hear what you have to say. Oh, Pat, come on. I know you're a magician. You think that's cool, but other people probably don't want to hear it. How do you get them out of that thought process to be able to share their message with confidence?
Well, we live in a comparative culture. So, because of social media, we compare everything we do from the pictures of our kids to other people's kids, from where we went on vacation to where other people went on vacation. And I think that's true with our stories too. But nowhere is it more harmful than in the telling of our stories, because I work with so many people who have life-changing stories, and they don't want to tell them because they think their stories aren't special enough or extraordinary enough or not as good as that person they heard on television. But here's what I want everybody to know. Ordinary stories are always better than extraordinary stories. Look, I coach someone who's been out in space. I coach 2 different astronauts, actually. I coach 6 different Olympians. I coach a guy who's been to the top of Mount Everest, not the base camp, but the actual top. And when he tells that story, how many other people who are listening can relate to that? Well, none. Nobody else has ever been up there. But when somebody tells a story about, falling down or coming out of the driveway as they're getting in their car, or arguing with their spouse about whether the toilet paper should come out over the top of the roll or under the bottom of the roll, how many other people can relate to that? Everybody else can relate to that. And I just think ordinary stories are more life-changing, more connecting. Whatever you want to use communication for to get someone's attention, don't tell a story that's different from them. Tell a story that's just like them. You want to know the number one way to get someone's attention? Tell them you have the same middle name as them. Tell them you grew up in the same small town as them. Tell them that you're from the same country over in Europe or wherever you're from as they are. When we have things in common with people, we have their attention like that. But everybody tries to use their story to separate themselves from other. I'm the biggest, I'm the mostest, I'm the fastest. I've got cured from the rarest disease ever. No one else ever been cured from this. And you're separating yourself from the person you're trying to communicate with instead of uniting yourself with the person that you're trying to communicate with. So the first thing I want to say for all of you boring people out there, you've got the best story in the world. If you're binge watching the most popular show on television, tell people about it, because so are they, and you'll have their attention. You'll connect with them. They'll lean in and be like, I'm binge watching that too. If you're super excited about playing Wordle or whatever the game of the month is that everybody has the app for now, talk about that. It's ordinary and everyone else is doing it, and you'll connect instantly because of the ordinariness, the boringness, the normalness of your story. Never be ashamed of that. Never hide that. As a matter of fact, put it out there for everybody to see, and you'll connect with more people, go further, rise faster, and communicate better than you've ever communicated before.
Oh, everyone, the chat box is like blowing up, Pat. Everyone's like, oh my gosh, I hope there's a replay. I can't write fast enough. That's what Kurt said. And Carrie wrote, connection is what builds commonality. Boring is where it's at, said Lisa. And I love this so much, Pat, because this takes the pressure off of so many of us. You nailed it. Oh my God. Drop the mic, Mr. Pat Quinn. You nailed it when you said so many people, especially nowadays in this culture of digital technology, right? Highlight reels, putting filters on our photos, being able to change anything about ourselves on social media. We think that we have to compete with the Joneses, if you will, right? Be the best, the greatest, the most impressive. But really, we have it all backwards. The way that we connect truly, genuinely with people is by sharing those parts of ourselves that we often want to hide, that we often are embarrassed by, that we're often ashamed of because we're like, oh, I'm the only one, right? I'm the only one who feels bad about myself sometimes. I'm the only one that sometimes sits in my room, and cries by myself because I'm grieving the loss of someone. What you are sharing with us is showing that no, those are the parts, those are like the golden nuggets right there that you want to share, because that's how people connect. I'll tell you an interesting story going along with this. One day I was in my car and I just got this, I don't know, this thought that was on my mind and my heart, and it was a tough time for me. I was going through a lot, and I said, I need to just get on video and share this. Like, I don't know what it was. It was just my instinct in that moment. It was a guttural feeling. And I just, Pat, put the camera on in my car with a hat on, no makeup, not fancy. And I just spoke. I just spoke about how, we're so often beating ourselves up because we think we have to be perfect. And sometimes it's just, it's too much. and we have to let ourselves off the hook, and we have to be kinder to ourselves. And that was it. I pressed stop and I just shared it. I didn't even think twice about it, which is different than what I usually do, which plan out my video and make sure that what I'm saying makes sense. I didn't do that. I just went with my gut, posted the video, and Pat, that is the most watched video that I've ever had. I had people sharing it, commenting to me, Renee, thank you so much. And I was like, wow, that just goes to show when you don't overthink it, when you don't go into comparison mode and think you have to be better than the person you just saw and your story's not impressive enough, think twice. And remember, everyone, remember what Pat said. Being ordinary actually makes you extraordinary. And being a regular person dealing with the day-to-day problems and emotions, that is what allows people to connect with you.
Yeah, I want to go one step farther, Renee. I don't think it's okay for you to tell your story when it's ordinary. I think you have an obligation to tell your story when it's ordinary. And here's why. Two reasons. One is I think we need to celebrate the ordinary. Because otherwise when a couple who's been married for 20 years has a quiet night in, watching television and sitting on the couch, they're going to feel, if the only people they hear telling their stories are the people who are out posting pictures on Instagram all the time about the exciting, amazing, super fun things that they're doing, people are going to think that staying in, having dinner, and sitting on the couch is weird or something. And it's not weird. It's what 80% of people do every night. But the other part of that, the other reason I think you have an obligation to tell your story is because you are uniquely equipped to reach a certain audience. In other words, Renee, you could be telling the exact same story as me. You could be telling a story of getting up on a cloudy day and struggling with your mood and your thoughts. And it would reach a certain group of people, and then other people would watch that and it just wouldn't resonate with them. And then I could come by and tell the exact same story in the exact same way, not better or worse than you tell it, but it would reach a completely different audience. Because there's a group of people who will only learn from you, and there's a group of people who will only learn from me, and then there's people who don't look like, sound like, or grew up anywhere like you and me, who have their own audience to hear their stories. And if only certain people are telling their stories, we're just missing a whole segment of people who need to hear certain messages. And so I just want you to know a couple of things. I want everybody watching this to know that you've been equipped with a story, good things and bad things that have happened in your life. And I think it is your obligation to share those stories, the ordinary ones, the good ones, the bad ones, because there's a group of people who can only learn it from you. A group of people who have your background, look like you, sound like you, grew up like you, had the same struggle as you, from the same perspective as you. I could have that story and it wouldn't reach those people, but you have that story. And you can reach those people because you are different than me for a reason. And your audience is different than mine for a reason. So I just want to encourage everybody who's watching this to embrace the ordinary, but also embrace the obligation that you have an audience that's different than mine, different than Renee's, different than anyone else's in the world because of your unique set of stories and backgrounds, that you need to get out there and share those stories, or those people will never be reached and they'll continue to struggle because nobody shared their stories.
Oh, Pat, you literally just gave me chills, like up my spine and all down my arms. That is so beautiful because it's so true. We all have a story to tell. Everyone lighting up this chat box right now. I hope that you are taking this in and really absorbing this, because we so often think that we're the only ones dealing with something. We're the only one. And I say this quite often. 4 of the most powerful words that the human spirit can hear and understand is you are not alone, right? You're not alone. And like Pat's saying, when we share our story, we show that one person, those thousands of people, millions of people, that, wow, they're not alone. And because we're all unique, all different, we all have different perspectives. As Pat said, he and I could tell the same story. It is going to sound completely different coming out of both of our mouths. So let this give you a gentle nudge and encourage you to, today, after this live, hop on a Facebook Live. Do what I did. Don't think too much about it. Share about what you thought about this interview, right? Get yourself into that practice of speaking aloud your story. Pat, this ties into what I'd like to ask you next, which is when you help people with their story, you craft it, right? They're ready to communicate this story to the world. What is the next step then to actually implement that? Because writing it and communicating it with the written word is beautiful and wonderful, but it's totally different than to actually put it out there. So what is the next step that you advise?
Well, the most important step for anybody who wants to get better at this is to do it and stop planning it. You know, there's an engineer in each of us that wants to go into a room, close the door, be by ourselves and plan. And some of us have the engineer in us so strong that we'd stay in that room for 3 years writing the perfect story, and we wouldn't come out of that room because it's not perfect yet. Now, I love what you did. You just turned on the camera and set it out to the world, and it wasn't perfect, and you weren't perfect, and there's a lot of power in that, because you're separating yourself from the need to be perfect and look perfect. But I wish everybody, the number one reason why people don't tell their story more is because it's not ready yet, because it's not perfect yet. But if you wait until it's perfect, you'll never tell your story. You really won't. You know, one of the things I love about your book, Renee, and I read a lot of books about communicating and about speaking. But one of the things that is absolutely unique about your book, I put communication books into two different categories. One category is people who are just talking about old school communication, like go knock on every door and go door to door and talk to people. And then I read a lot of books that are all about like new school communication, like, hey, just go on social media. You don't actually ever have to be in the room with another live human being. Yours is the first book I've ever read that actually puts the two together and says these two don't have to work against each other. These two don't have to be like, you don't have to choose. I think some people are out there like, I'm old school, and I am more old school. I'm more likely to pick up the phone than I am to go on Instagram. Or I'm new school. Like some people are just like, oh, I don't leave voicemails. That's for old people. I just send people text or snap them or whatever. Like you don't have to choose. Your book actually shows people how the new technology and old school communication, like face to face, hardwired communication, actually work perfectly in concert together to help someone not only improve their communication, but be a more effective communicator, to grow their business, to grow their career, to grow their life, to grow their fruitfulness, to grow their joy. And I just think it's a masterful piece of work, Renee. I want to thank you for the book. I want to thank you for the contribution you've made to communication and the art of communication, because I know you view it as an art. And I just, if anybody's watching this and hasn't gone out and picked up a copy of Renee's new book yet, uh, don't walk, like run to your nearest Amazon, or wherever you buy your books, and like grab the book and buy one for a friend too. By the way, if there's somebody who you want to be a good communicator, because some of us live with people who aren't as good at communicating as we are, or if you have kids and you want them to be good communicators, the greatest gift you can give your kids is to help them be great communicators. Because it's going to serve them in their career, it's going to serve them in their schooling, it's going to serve them in every relationship that they are in for the rest of their life. It's going to bring them more happiness and joy because there isn't going to be the miscommunication or the lack of communication. And I just think if you can, especially for the people who are a little bit younger, who are like, oh, I don't ever actually have to really talk to people. I can just be in relationship on Snapchat or Instagram. Like this book brings it together. This book merges the two worlds in a way. And I think the same thing about how you get better at communication. I think I love the fact that you just turned on the camera and went on Facebook, but I would also love you just to sit down with three people and tell them the story over a cup of coffee. I would love to, call up somebody somebody who lives by you who doesn't get a lot of visitors. Call up your aunt or your grandma who lives by themselves and stop by and have a cup of coffee and just talk. And it's a great place to tell your story. A, because the person who you're talking to is going to appreciate it so much, because so few people stop by just to talk. Everybody stops by with an agenda. Oh, I'm rushed, I'm rushed, I'm rushed, I'm rushed, I'm rushed. Well, what if we weren't rushed and we just stopped and talked? We'd all become better communicators. It'd be the perfect mix of old school and new school communication in our lives. And probably all of our blood pressure would go down too. I see no weaknesses here, Renee. I see lots of benefits. I don't see a lot of downside.
Oh my God, Pat, thank you so much. Literally, I'm like, hold back the tears, Renee. That means so very much to me. You are like a mentor to me, and I have learned so much from you. So hearing you praise the book and everything that it stands for just means so much to me. So thank you for that. Thank you very much.
Oh, absolutely. Like I said, I think it's a treasure. It's a treasure for me and every part of the communication I do in my life, from my professional communication to my relationship communication. But for my kids, I just think if there's one gift I want to give them, I want to give them the gift of good communication, not only between the two of us, so that our relationship stays healthy and communicative as they go from teenagers to young adults, from young adults to married adults, and on through life, but also so that in their lives, I have one daughter who's navigating the academic world. I have one daughter who's navigating the nonprofit fundraising world. They're both navigating relationships. Like in every one of their worlds, communication benefits them. And the book is not about giving speeches. The book is about great communication. And the more effective you can become at communication, the more you're going to see the lines go up in every area of your life, from your relationship line to your finances line to your career line to your joy line. All those lines are going to be on the upswing when you improve communication. We know this. We know when there's broken communication, we quit our jobs or we get fired. We know when there's broken communication, relationships either end up in turmoil or ending. We know when there's broken communication, kids go away from their parents, not toward their parents. There's just so many places where broken communication can be fixed. And to have a guide, one guide to help us with all of that is just a treasure.
Oh, you stated all that so beautifully. And like you said, Pat, it really is the thread that connects all of us, communication. But at the same time, it's the one thing that I have observed, which is why I wrote the book, the one thing that we often overlook when we're having problems in our relationships, even parents and children, teachers and students, work relationships. We are ready to point fingers. Oh, it's because of this and it's because of that thing and all these exterior things. But we don't turn the mirror back at ourselves and say, okay, hold on. Could any of this have to do with the way I'm communicating or the way I'm listening, which I think is the most crucial component of communication, the art of listening and fully listening, not listening to reply, but listen to actually hear and understand. Holding that mirror up for yourself and saying, could this be a possible factor of why there's some tension, why there are some issues? And hopefully this book will allow people to shine the light for themselves to ask that question. Because once we have that self-awareness, then it just elevates from there. And it's not always to say it's our fault with the communication, but taking that accountability and just understanding that communication is a factor. And it's not a factor, it's usually the factor. So the way you just stated that, I'm so glad I'm recording this because I'm gonna have to clip that. That was like,
well, I think good communication elevates everything else that you do as well. I mean,
yeah.
I've got a great magic story. I was not the greatest magician in the world. I'm a little clumsy, and my hands are not as dexterous. Is that the word?
Yeah.
Dexterous? I don't have the dexterity that some of these other people do that can pull cards out of all over the place. But there was another magician in town who was kind of competing against me. His name was David. And honestly, David was a better magician than I was. He knew more tricks. He was better with sleight of hand. But he just stood up and did the magic tricks. Like, he didn't talk between them. And when somebody would come up to him afterwards and be like, hey, do you do birthday parties? Do you do this? He'd be like, yeah, here's a card. Like, he wouldn't talk. Now, I wasn't the best magician in the world, but I'd worked on some communication during my magic show. So I was talking constantly during the whole thing, making jokes, getting people to laugh, telling people what was going on, or fooling people about what wasn't going on. And then afterwards, when people come up and talk to me, I'd talk about it and talk to them about it, and they'd get interested in it. And, I was a more successful magician because I wasn't the best magician, but paired with good communication, I elevated above the others. My daughter rides horses, and there's a number of horse trainers we could choose from. And there's one that everybody said was like, this is the best trainer. And what I realized later, after we hired that person to be our trainer, and she worked with my daughter for a number of years, is that she actually wasn't probably the best trainer, but she was the best communicator. She wasn't the best horseback rider, but she was the best teacher, which is the same as communicator in many cases. Like, she communicated better both to the parents and to the kids that she was coaching. It elevates, well, it doesn't really matter what you do. The plumber who gets the most business is the plumber who can communicate the best, not the one who can fix the most plumbing problems. Whatever you do, communication it elevates it. It elevates it. And so I just think that's communication, whatever you do for a living, whatever your job is, however you help people, communication will elevate. Good communication skills will elevate it, and you'll get more impact in your life.
The same is true, in my opinion, with doctors. There have been doctors, even my general practitioner, right? And I would go to him, and there was no conversation, no bedside manner. And even though he was a great doctor, Pat, I'm telling you, I was like, no, I can't do this anymore, because you're great at what you do, but you're not making me feel comfortable. And when it comes to our health, I don't know about you, but I want to feel calm and like, okay, everything's okay. Even if you have to just talk to me like a child sometimes, I need that. I need that communication where you're not just rushing me out of the room and you're like, okay, Renee, did you get your blood work? Okay, great. See you next year. I want to have some conversation. Oh, what have you been up to, Doc? Renee, how about you? Heard you wrote a book. Having that interaction makes all the difference in the world. And I know an aunt of mine, she's believes in this so deeply that she's literally changed her doctor about 4 times because each time she just didn't feel comfortable. And when we have that communication, even if, as you said, as we started this conversation, even if it's just finding the commonality of, oh, you love blue shirts, I love blue shirts. Boom, a connection's made, right? And as silly as that may sound, and as often as sometimes we want to believe that that's something silly, that is a moment of connection. So just goes to show, again, for everyone here, when you feel yourself held back, your story's not good enough, this person's on a pedestal and you're not. No. Hear Pat and I's voices saying, no, you have an obligation to share your story. You have an obligation to share who you are. And we can all find a commonality with one another. But the only way to do it is through listening, and listening to hear and not just to respond. Pat, I want to take a second because there's a wonderful woman here in the chat box right now, and her name's Tara, and she wants me to ask you how you go about crafting a story that's very, very complicated. Tara is such a incredible spirit of a woman. She's gone through so much. I mean, trauma that probably most people couldn't identify with. You know, things that as a child, I mean, getting taken away from her mother and trafficked, things that not everybody can identify with. How would you go about helping someone like her go and craft her story, go about crafting her story?
Oh, it's a great question, Renee, and I appreciate you asking it, Tara. Here's what I know. I know that the right story is usually not the whole story. And the reason that the whole story isn't usually the right story is because it just overwhelms people. When Renee introduced me today, I told you my story, which went magician to teacher to speaking coach. That's the story I told. Well, I think you can probably guess that's not the whole story. Somewhere in there, I forgot to mention kids and a marriage and my faith. And I'm a complex person with a long story. I've been around for over 50 years. A lot has happened. I could name something that happened every single year. If I wanted to tell you the whole story, I could name something that happened I remember in 4th grade, I got bitten by a dog. It was quite a traumatic experience. I missed like 3 weeks of school. It was crazy. And then like 7th grade, oh my gosh, I got braces. I didn't want to smile for any of my pictures. Oh, it was crazy. And then it's like, I could tell you the whole story, but that doesn't help you. If your goal is to help others, if your goal is to brighten the world, help solve problems, have a positive impact on the lives of people, you will not tell them the whole story, because the whole story doesn't help people. What instead you'll do is pick out a part of the story, a portion of the story. The portion of the story that I picked out today that I thought would help you the most is magician to teacher to speaking coach, because that's the part that I think there's lessons that I can teach today without overwhelming you, that I've chosen to tell those parts of my story. Now, I'm a father of two perfect children. Well, not really perfect, but I think they are. And I give talks on parenting all the time. You know, I wrote a book on parenting, and I give talks to people on parenting. And when I introduce myself to an audience of parents hoping to learn about parenting, I don't mention that I was a magician. I don't mention that I'm a speaking coach. I mention that I'm a parent. And I mentioned that I was a teacher because I learned some things being a teacher that parents can learn from. So I think the hard part isn't having a story. I think we all have one. I think the hard part is actually saying, okay, what part of the whole story should I tell today that would help people without overwhelming people? And I really try to limit it down to one lesson, or what I say is one room or one moment. You have to take the whole story and limit it down to one room or one moment to share with people. This is a technique called episodic storytelling. And if you have, one thing that I really encourage everybody to do is to keep a log of their stories, or to save their stories somewhere, whether you do that in a notebook or you do that online somewhere. And then when it comes time to either give a presentation or have a conversation, you can look at all of your stories and say, which one would help this person the most? Which one should I choose to tell today? And what I'm not going to do is tell them all. What I'm going to do is pick and choose from my stories and choose the one that I think will help them the most. And then your story is like a sunrise. Every time somebody sees you, they see a little bit more of it, and they see a little bit more of it, and they see a little bit more of it. You continue to brighten their day every time, as compared to your story being like the noontime sun that we look directly at and we're like, ah, that's just a little much. Can I have some sunglasses, please? Like, you want to make sure that you unfold yourself for people and slowly share with them your stories, instead of the very first day that you're with them, or any one time that you're with them, unloading all of your stories onto them. And I think if you can think about it like that, you're gonna be in a much better situation than if you try to tell your entire story the very first time you have an opportunity to share with someone.
Thank you so much, Pat. Tara is clapping and saying amen in the chat box. So that aligned with her beautifully. Now, as you just said, it's really, really so beneficial to keep all of your stories in a place. And I could not agree more with you there, because sometimes stories just come to you, right? The shower, always in the shower. It's always when you're like, oh God, I forgot that happened. The shower, you're on a bike ride, wherever, and you forget to log them somewhere. So Mr. Pat Quinn has an amazing resource, you guys. It's so awesome. I wanted to tell you about it, and it's called Storylink.com. And this will help you to save all of your stories in one area. That way, when you go to present, you don't always need to use that same, what Pat calls the opening story, right? Maybe there's an opening story that resonates better with this audience. So, Pat, if you could tell us about Storylink.com, which Pat is the founder of, I would love that.
Yeah, Renee, like you, I had trouble keeping track of my stories. I'd jot them down on Post-it notes in the backs of napkins and wherever I was. And I actually had a folder. I kept them all in. But I was like one good gust of wind away from losing all of my stories. And then somebody gave me a story journal. And it worked. I filled it with stories. The problem was that the journal wasn't always with me. Sometimes I'd be at work and my story journal would be at home, or sometimes I'd be in a restaurant and my story journal would be in the car. And so I'd jot down the story on a napkin or a Post-it note, and I'd jam it into the story journal. And when I got the story journal, it was 1 inch thick, and like a year later, it was like 5 inches thick, because it had all these little scraps of paper in it. And again, I was a good gust of wind away from losing everything. And so I said to myself, why isn't there a place online to store all of my stories? I have a place to store my music. I have a place to store my photos. Why isn't there a place to store my stories? And I looked all over for one, and I couldn't find one, so I created one. I created a tool called Storylink.com. It's Storylink. There's a Q at the end of it, linq.com. And what Storylink.com is an online place to store all of your stories. And you can actually enter them there and categorize them. There's different categories: opening stories and teaching stories and selling stories, different types of stories. And then anytime you need to give a presentation, you simply go to storylink.com and you say, okay, I want to start with this story. Then I'm going to tell this story. Then I'm going to finish with this story. And you push one button and it prints your script right out. It actually takes the process of having a sales call or having a conversation or giving a presentation from hours down to minutes. And the best part is that if you like how I think about telling stories and you want some extra help from me telling stories, there's video teaching targeted to each type of story right there. So I'm right there with you, sharing with you the best way to tell that type of story. And the good news is we're offering a free trial right now. If you haven't signed up for storylink.com now, you can go to storylink.com, STORYLINQ.com, and you can sign up for a free trial. And we're actually we do a free monthly training, and we've got a free monthly training coming up next week on how to be funny in your presentations and in your storytelling. Because a lot of people are just like, it's not funny, and people stop listening, and they're like, I see that person, and he makes everybody laugh. How can I do that? And we're actually interviewing Danny Brazel, who's a professional comedian and a great professional speaker who's just hilarious. When you hear him talk, he's just so funny. We're interviewing Danny Brazel on how to add humor to any story, how to add humor to any presentation. And if you sign up for your free trial right now, you'll still be on the free trial on Tuesday night when that training comes, and you'll be able to take advantage of that training as part of the free trial. And you'll have a chance to enter some stories, see if StoryLink works for you. And I think you're going to love it because it's the one place to store all of your stories.
You are going to love this. You guys, I put the link in the chat box, so storylink.com. Definitely take advantage of this. Pat is so right. Even just here, I can show you. There are times that I just have, little snippets of stories all over the place. And when I started using StoryLink, I was like, thank you, dear God. It literally I can't even tell you how much time it cut out for me of looking around my house and my desk for where I felt inspired and then wrote snippets of stories. So definitely take advantage of this. It is going to save you so much time and energy. And the fact that you can print it out right after, it's just the best. The best. So I want to ask you one more question, and then I'm going to open up the chat box to more questions. So if you've been having a burning desire to ask Pat something, please write it in the chat box. What I want to ask you, Pat, is when someone's starting a new business or a new project or a new venture of any kind, and they don't feel comfortable with communicating what they want or what they need. For example, I know that you're a big proponent of getting on other people's stages to speak. If someone came to you and said, well, Pat, I want to do that, but I just don't feel comfortable communicating, asking, what would you advise them?
All right, so this is a great question, Renee. I think one of the fastest ways to grow any business, grow any cause, raise money for any nonprofit, get any message out to the world is by being on other people's stages. But people are afraid to ask to be on other people's stages. They won't there's a podcast I want to be on, and I know if I would just ask the person, they'd probably say yes, but I don't want to ask. I don't know if that's because we feel bad or we don't trust ourselves yet. So I've got this great little activity that you can do to help you with this, and it's real simple. So we're going to take a list of what we call your champions, okay? So this is anybody who might be able to help you in any way grow your cause, grow your business. We're going to make a list of them. Some people call this a Dream 100. When I tried to come up with my Dream 100, there were only 31 of them. So it's my Dream 31. I just don't have that many friends. Okay, so we're going to make a list of all the people. Now, where do you get that? I'm old school. I got mine out of the address book on my phone. You might get yours, Renee, off of your Facebook friends or your Twitter followers or your Instagrammers or whatever they're called. And so wherever you get LinkedIn, LinkedIn connections. You can make your list from anywhere. These are the people who kind of know you, and they might be able to help you professionally or with your cause or whatever. Okay. Now we're going to give each of them 2 scores. Okay. We're going to give each of them 2 scores. The first score we're going to give them on a scale of 1 to 10, what's their relationship score? So a 10 would be like your bestie, like somebody who you talk to every single day. And a 1 would be like somebody who you are aware of professionally, but they may not be aware of you. So I have no real relationship. Or somebody that you knew in high school, but you haven't talked to them since. So everybody gets a relationship score from 1 to 10. And then the second score we're going to give them on a scale of 1 to 10 is their influencer score. So your aunt who isn't on social media and doesn't have any network, she's a 1. Okay, you got a great relationship with her, you talk to her every day, but she has no influence. As compared to somebody who has a massive social media following, or somebody who can open up doors for you, somebody who's really well connected, they'd be a 10. Okay, so now you've got 2 scores for everybody. Now here's how we're going to work, how we're going to ask people for help. We're going to start with the 10 ones. We're going to start with the people who we have the best relationship with, but they have the lowest influence. Why are we going to start with those? We're going to start asking those people for help because it's going to be easier because we have a great relationship. And if we blow it, there's not a high cost because they weren't going to get us in front of a lot of people anyway. Okay, so it's really easy here for me to call my aunt and tell her my story because I have a great relationship with her. And if I blow it, she's not going to, post on social media that Pat's got a terrible story. Or I'd like her to sign up at Storylink. If she signs up at Storylink, one person's going to sign up at Storylink. Okay. Now we're going to work our way down. Now at the other end of my list is somebody who, like Mark Cuban, is on the other end of my list. I don't really have a relationship with him. I'm aware of him. He knows people that I know, but he doesn't know who I am. He wouldn't recognize me if he walked in a room. Yet if Mark Cuban would tweet about Storylink, like Storylink would go off the charts if Mark Cuban would just tweet about it. I'm going to save him for last. So we're going to start with the 10 ones and then do like the 10 twos and the 10 threes, 10 fours, 10 fives. Then we're going to do the 9 ones, 9 twos, 9 threes, 9 four. We're going to work our way down. And what we're going to find is, even if your list is only 31 people, the first 10 times you do this, you're not going to be very good at it. But by the time, then we're going to start getting to the people that we have less and less of a relationship with. And the stakes are getting higher and higher. So the last group we're going to do is like the 10 tens we'll start with, and then we'll do the 9 tens, and then we'll do the 8 tens, then we'll do the 7 tens. Eventually you get down, and by this time you're so comfortable with it. You're just like, oh, I don't know Mark Cuban, but I'll pick up the phone or I'll send an email because I'm good at it. I've done it 100 times already. And I've gotten yeses and I've gotten no, and neither one has killed me. Yep. Neither one has put me out of business. I didn't die when my aunt said no, she didn't want to sign up for Storylink. It was a great low risk proposition. So if you start with your 10 ones, it is such low risk and so safe for you. And then you'll finish this whole thing with your 110s, which are the hardest ones to do. In between there, by the way, you had some 1010s, which are great ones to do because you have a good relationship and they have influence. Renee, I know you've got some people who you know well and you know they have big influence. So you went to them and said, will you write a blurb for my book? Will you come and can I interview you and things like that? You're starting with people, but there's also probably some stretch ones for you that are lower number relationship-wise, but bigger influence that you can go to next now that you've got some good ones under your belt. So this is a model that everybody can use to stay in a zone of safety until you're comfortable and then move yourself into bigger and bigger pastures that you are less and less comfortable in. But there's such a simple transition that it works for everybody to get their message out to the world.
That's really good. I hope you all wrote that down because that is such a great practice and it's easy, right? We can all do that. We can all make a list, even if it's 10 people you have, even if it's 15, it doesn't matter. But just getting you accustomed and comfortable with the ask, doing it when it's someone that you're really comfortable with, it helps you to build that muscle. Pat, that's so funny. In my book, I have a practice for initiating conversations because so many people are not comfortable initiating conversations. So what I say is get a friend, your wing person, whoever that is, someone you're super comfortable with, and tell them that you guys are going out. Like pick a place, first of all, that you're comfortable with. So just like you're saying with making a list of the person you're most comfortable with, pick a spot that you've been to before, you know the atmosphere. And the challenge is that you have to start a conversation with as many people as possible. It doesn't have to be a romantic interest. It could be anyone, just the woman or man sitting next to you. And your friend, your wing person, is there to just give you that gentle nudge when you start to get too afraid and you're like, I can't do this. They're right there being like, you got this. Just start a conversation and say hello. And it's a great practice as well because it's simple, but it lets you start in a place where you're already comfortable. That way you feel content, you know what to expect, and then as the weeks go on, try different places. And before you know it, you're making conversations everywhere you go.
Then it just
Right?
becomes easy. Yep.
That's it.
You'll do it enough times, and what you'll find, and I don't want anybody to think that when you do what I just described or when you do what Renee just described, that you're not going to get no's. Like, you are going to fail. And that's
Yep.
the power of it, is that in my model, you're failing on your 10 ones and your 9 ones. You're failing in front of people who love you, and the stakes were pretty low. In Renee's model, you're failing in front of people who you'll never meet again.
Yeah.
So let it go. Get good at just letting it roll. Like, oh, that one didn't work. Because any business that's successful, any career that's successful, and anybody who's in a successful relationship has failed. And they just have let it go, and they try it again, and they let it go, and they try it again, and they let it go, and they try it again. So I think both of our models, both of our exercises that we just recommended are really getting people to get past the first no and not letting it crush you, and getting the stakes as low as possible in those initial no's, so that you're better off, you're better at it when you get to the high stakes ones. And if you get a no from a high stakes ones, you let it roll and try another high stakes one. So I think that's great, Renee.
Oh, yeah. And Pat, it's just such a testament to the practice is what makes the progress. It's not just talking about it, not thinking about it, not even just reading about it. Even with my book, I have a reflection section so everyone can answer the questions and not just read it, but really let it absorb through the written word and then go out and do these practices. So everything that Pat and I are both speaking about, the commonality there is that it's about trying, failing, trying again, failing again, until you get to that point where it's so second nature that you feel comfortable and you feel confident. I talk so much about taking imperfect action. And imperfect action to me is just this. It's not doing it when you feel completely ready. It's doing it in spite of the fear, in spite of you feeling so nervous the minute that camera light turns on and you have to record a video, feeling anxious, still doing it. Because just by doing it, then the confidence is developed, right? Because you've done it so many times, you're like, all right, cool, I got this.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I love the book. You can tell I love the book because I have it in multiple formats. You gave me a
Aww.
copy, and it was so nice of you to give me a copy. But we were talking right before we popped on here that I also have it on Kindle, because that's how you know I love a book, because I want to have access to it all the time, and I don't fly with heavy books like this because it's too heavy to carry around. But I have my Kindle with me all the time, and so I bought the Kindle version of it as well, and I have this version of it. So that's how you know when I love it. Some books I have like in 4 different versions. I have the audio version of it, then I listen to my car, then I get out of my car and I start reading it, then I go to my Kindle and I Kindle it, then I look at it on my phone. It's like I just love the book. So thank you for sharing that.
You are so welcome, and thank you, Pat. I'm so honored that you endorsed it. One last thing, because this is one of the things that I love most about you, and there are many things, Pat, many things, but this I love most. In this digital landscape that we're living in, which is such a gift, right? You and I couldn't be speaking like this if not for new school technology. But with that said, what comes along with this is a lot of noise. And I know that we all experience it online. There are so many programs and there are so many coaches, and the way you should do this, to be successful, you should do this. And what I see, and what I know many of us see, is that a lot of leaders nowadays teach that in order to be successful, you have to be out there, completely out there on every social media channel, blasting everything that you're doing, constantly connected. You have to be constantly digitally connected. But then I look at you, Pat Quinn, and I see that is not your model for success, because just recently, you've gotten on Facebook, and I never see you blasting things crazy all over Facebook, yet you are super successful. You have an incredible business. You have an incredible following. So my question to you is, how do you how do you connect your success with the model that you're practicing for yourself? That's so different than what many leaders right now are preaching.
Sure. Well, I think a few things. First of all, number one thing is that there's more than one right way to do this. I believe that in speaking. I believe that in growing a business. Anybody who tells you there's only one way to give a presentation, or there's only one way to give a speech, I would just walk away from them. There's more than one way to do this. Okay, and it's true with your business too. If you're following a guru who says the only way to do it is through this method, or you have to do this, I would just, I just don't think that person has been around long enough to realize there's more than one right way to do this. The second thing that I think you cannot fake and you cannot buy is authenticity. I think you have to be yourself. And I think if you are somebody who in your daily life isn't wired in all the time, and who it isn't fun for you and it isn't comfortable for you, and then you try to come on and be like, oh, hey, hip cats and dogs, how you doing? I was just on this Instacart the other day, posting some pictures, and it's like, I just think people are going to see through that. Like, that's not you. Like, don't pretend to have it be you. And so if you start with there's more than one right way to do this, then you're not forced into any model. If you follow that up with there's nothing as valuable as authenticity, like be yourself. And then the third thing I think that is super powerful is to just show your weaknesses. If you're not good at something, and we've talked about this before, Renee, that nobody does this better than Ellen. I just think first thing Ellen tells everybody to any audience she speaks to is I'm bad at dancing. I'm just not good at dancing. And the second thing Ellen does to every audience she's in front of is immediately start dancing. like that's what she just gets it out of the way. She's like, oh, I thought I'd dance for it because I'm terrible. And then it's out. And then it's just open, and it's just authentic, and it's just out there. So I just want to caution everybody against the idea that there's only one way to do this and that there's a right way for you. I also think different audiences learn in different ways. And if you want to go online and just be online and just have an online presence, you'll reach a certain audience. But if you wanted to just go in person, or instead of going one to many, just go one to one and do it through individual conversations, there's an audience for that too. As a matter of fact, there's a hungry audience for that, partly because they have a disconnect in their life because everything's digital, partly because we're coming out of or in the middle of a time when we've been separated from a lot of people for a while. So I think there's a hungry audience for this is one of the reasons I love your book, Renee, is because you don't just espouse digital communication. You recognize that there's this interplay between them, that they can feed each other, that they can fill each other, that they complement each other rather than compete with each other. One doesn't replace the other. There's room for both of them. And in every business, I think there's room for both of them. And your business may thrive offline, or your business may thrive online, or it may thrive in both. But I just think you've captured the interplay between these two forms of communication better. And I'm thankful that you recognize that there's more than one right way to do this. And the goal for everybody should be to be authentic and to do it the way that reaches their audience the best, impacts their audience the most, and creates the most joy and positivity in other people's lives.
Here, yes, PQ. That is where it's at. I love what you stand for.
Well, the last thing, let me say one last thing, Renee. I just got to say this one last thing. Stop. Just like you shouldn't tell your whole story, you should not try to do everything. I just cringe when I watch business people who are entrepreneurs starting a business who are like, I have to be on Twitter and Instagram and LinkedIn and Snapchat and TikTok and Facebook and have an email newsletter. And I have a YouTube channel too. I'm like, no. As a matter of fact, if you try to do all 8 of those things, you won't do any of them well. Yeah. I'm a bigger fan of picking one to be your primary. And you can use the others to feed your primary, but pick one way to communicate that is going to be the primary place where you're going to put the most stuff out. And you can repurpose your stuff onto the other channels to grab new audiences. But I just think I watch people just working themselves 30 hours a day trying to do it all and get it on every single channel. And I'm like, pick one and get good at it. You're not good at any of them right now.
Yeah, yeah,
Pick
yeah.
one and master it. Pick one and love it. Pick one and live there so you can actually be part of the community and respond to people in a timely fashion instead of just posting the next thing in 16 different places. Pick one. And my best advice is to not try to do them all, especially in the beginning of a new venture. Pick one to be your primary source, use the others to drive to that one, and I think you're going to find a lot more success.
Pat, I love how you look at business. I love how you simplify everything. And just so you know, my word and my intention for 2022 is simplicity, to embrace simplicity. Just make everything simpler, right? My closets, the thoughts in my mind, the way I go about my business. And that is why I feel so connected to you in the way that you run your business. It's done so authentically. It's done in a way that works for you. And I feel much easier and more fulfilling when you work within your business in this way. And I told you this earlier, but I was saying this to my clubhouse room earlier today about you. I said, this is what I love so much about him. He doesn't go along with the masses just because this is how it should be done. There are more than one way to do everything. And as Pat says, you have to do what feels authentic and right to you. Pat Quinn's doing it. That's why he's such a success and such a master communicator. That's why I'm so grateful, Pat, that you endorsed this book and you and I have connected, because you are a master communicator and I have learned so much from you. You guys, keep following him. Get on Storylink.com. Reach out to him, because I'm telling you, working with you, Pat, my own stories have been crafted in such simpler yet more beautiful and authentic ways, and I just see how you are helping so many people, not just the Shark Tanks of the world, but also the people who are just starting from the ground level up. So thank you for this interview. And can you let everyone know where to reach you?
You can reach me at storylink.com, STORYLINQ.com.
Woo! You guys take advantage of this free trial. I'm telling you, you will not be sorry. The chat box is lighting up. Getting Storylink right now. Already signed up. So we love you, Pat Quinn. Thank you for this interview, and I will see you very soon.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Renee.
Okay, bye-bye.